Morning, colleagues. Let's begin with a word of prayer this morning. Eternal Father, righteous God, we invite your presence here as in this chamber as we begin these deliberations today in this finance committee. Give us wisdom, give us understanding, and help us as we make these decisions with regard to our budget and the future of our country, that we will do so with a sense of concern and a sense of doing what is right for the most people that we can. Father, we remember all of those who are grieving this morning because of deaths in our island, and I pray, Father, that you can comfort them as only you know how. May they seek your refuge, and I pray that you will bless those families and everyone who are grieving at this time. Bless our deliberations, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated. Colleagues, when we concluded on Friday, we had finished the appropriations to the Attorney General and to various entities under his oversight. This morning we are going to turn our attention now to the appropriation to the Premier and his ministries. As we examine these appropriations today, again I repeat my what I asked for previously when we set out with Finance Committee. If you could state your questions as quickly as you can and avoid long preambles, it would help move things along much quickly, and I think everyone would have an opportunity to get more questions in. And also, please, let's try and avoid the banter across the floor as well as we continue with this. So we're now, with regard to the appropriations to Premier, we're going to commence on page 9 of the booklet that you have with the appropriations. That is, we're going to begin with CB01. That's found on page 43 of the plan and estimates. So CB01, Development and Coordination of Government Policy, $1,612,833 in 2020 and $1,847,280 in 2021. Are there any questions? Georgetown Central.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Through you to Mr. Chair, to the Premier. Can the Premier say when creating policies for the various departments he's in charge of, whether there is a SWOT analysis or stakeholder mapping done for the implementation of a policy?
Mr. Chairman, I don't understand that question, sir.
Mr. Chair, maybe it might help if the cabinet secretary could answer, but I can reword it again if the Premier likes.
Remember, I would ask you to try to reword it.
I'm trying to understand what it is you're asking.
Okay, I'll ask it a different way. Before implementing any policy, does the government or does the minister and cabinet consider pros and cons to the implementation of any one policy?
Absolutely.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Can the Premier say how that is done? Is there a structured way that is done through the civil service in respect to policy creation?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, the way many policies are developed and implemented starts like this. You campaign on the basis of certain broad policies and strategies to effect certain results. If you get a mandate to do so, when you get into government, you first have broad cabinet support for what it is you're doing. Then the individual ministry will put together a team to work through the various aspects of developing the policy. They will test these against various checks and so forth. And then the more detailed, in many cases, business plan is developed about its viability, how you're going to fund it, what the outcomes are likely to be, and so forth, before it's finally adopted as a sort of detailed policy by the cabinet. It may require legislation, it may require additional staff, it may require a whole range of things. It certainly will require funding. So it's a fairly long process to get a policy from conception all the way through to actual action. I think probably the best or maybe worst example of that is the cruise port and enhanced cargo port project, which has been 6+ years in development.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, when creating policy, are the pros and cons factored in on the effects of other departments that you're not in charge of? So, for example, a policy decision that is under your ministry but could potentially affect something like roads. During that SWOT analysis and pros and cons, do you factor in effects of that policy decision on other things across the nation and across various different ministries?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is a lot of cross-ministerial interaction and discussion, trying to anticipate what the impacts of any particular policy is going to be more broadly.
Mr. Chair, through you, is there a current policy to strategically increase the population of the Cayman Islands?
No.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is there a strategic policy to increase the work permit numbers by 10,000?
No.
Through you, Mr. Chair, throughout the policy decisions in respect to the economy that is booming right now that the Premier has indicated is as a result of the decisions and policies of his administration, was there any SWOT analysis of negative concerns about what it would affect places like, or concerns like the rental market or traffic in respect to the policy decisions?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, 2 years ago, I sat here and took a hammering from the member from Georgetown Central about unemployment, how his people were unable to get jobs. We indicated very clearly, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, that we had a plan in place that was turning the economy around and would have the effect of creating significant new employment and entrepreneurship opportunities. When we took office, when I was first appointed as Premier in May of 2013, Cayman's unemployment rate for Caymanians was at 10.5%, one of the highest ever. It is now at 4.8%. That is a result in large part of the strategies employed by this government to get the economy moving again. Now, an obvious consequence of a vibrant economy is that there is going to be more people coming here. Every time that has ever occurred in Cayman, that is the result. Therefore, if there are more people here, there's going to be more pressure on accommodation, going to be more pressure on infrastructure. The government acknowledges all of that. But, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I much rather have that challenge to deal with now than the challenge of thousands of Caymanians unemployed, which was the situation that we were grappling with when for the whole of my first term as Premier and for at least the first year of this term. So, Mr. Chairman, I wish that there was some convenient tap that we could just turn off and say, we've had enough now. Mr. Supermarket owner, Mr. Construction company owner, you can't get any more work permits, so you can't expand your business and you can't grow. So what we are dealing with are the challenges of success. There are challenges without a doubt, but as I say, I much rather grapple with those than the ones that this member from Georgetown Central hammered me on for the first year of this term.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the Premier speaks about challenges of success, and I agree with him. Those are challenges of success. But what I'm trying to ask the Premier, Mr. Chair, is was there any SWOT analysis that indicated there could be potential concerns to traffic by way of the policy decisions of this administration that would increase the number of persons on the island, whereby the government could actually take measures from years ago to mitigate the traffic concerns that we're having? Because we recognize that we've gone from 2013 of 19,000+ work permit holders to 2019 now 30,000+ work permit holders. That's an extra 10,000+ persons on the island. Was there any SWOT analysis that said consider the numbers of work permits you have, or consider the effects on the rental market? And if there was any of those SWOT analysis done, was the government doing anything to implement or mitigate those challenges to success that the Premier speaks about?
Mr. Chairman, the member speaks as though there is some, as I said before, monetary out behind the government administration building that we can just go and pick the dollars off of as we need. The first term that I was in office, the Cayman Islands government did not have the ability to borrow money because the financial state of the government was so poor. There was no money to do anything with. What we have done by way of managing the government's finances, by way of stimulating the economy, is to create an environment whereby government revenues have significantly increased. Government has borrowed no money. It has paid down hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. It has turned a substantial surplus for the last 2 budgets. That has placed the government in a position where we are able to do things. The government has not taken any deliberate policy decision to increase the population in any way. The increase in population is a result of the stimulation of the economy, which has created and is creating greater business and entrepreneurial opportunities for Caymanians who own those businesses. Employment opportunities for Caymanians who were out of a job when we took office. I've said time and time again, and there are the statistics to prove it, Cayman is a unique study when it comes to employment. There are few places in the world, if any, where you have the number of, the percentage of your workforce on work permit as it is in Cayman. But one of the difficult things to understand, at least until you do some analysis, is that every time in Cayman's history, when the number of work permit holders has fallen significantly, Caymanian unemployment has increased significantly. And that is counterintuitive until you do some analysis, because when you see work permit numbers increasing, it means that businesses are expanding. Business owners are investing more in their business. They're growing their businesses. And in doing so, they are creating more job opportunities for everybody, and for Caymanians in particular. So when you see those numbers start to shrink, it means that those businesses are saying, hang on, we have some problems, some headwinds ahead, and the opportunities for Caymanians start to shrink. We've gone through that cycle at least 4 times since I've been in this house as an elected member. I've watched it, I've done the studies myself, and it is true as can be. That is the reality of the Cayman economic construct. So when you have more people coming in, obviously you put more pressure on housing. It's a great challenge for us. Rents go up, we know that. The government has spoken through my policy statement and through other members and ministers here who have addressed it, that the government continues to look at ways to improve the opportunities and chances of Caymanians to own their own place. And what we are now moving on by reducing and removing, in some instances, all stamp duty. We are pressing ahead with a renewal of the GGHAM program, the Government Guaranteed Home Assisted Mortgage Scheme, whereby government guarantees the first 20% of the mortgage to avoid people having to put up collateral or deposit, Caymanians, so they can get a place. And we are now driving through with a study into what is it that we can do to incentivize construction developers really to build for the lower and middle income bracket, because with a booming economy as we do, and with the cost of land and the scarcity of land in desirable places in Cayman, developers are tending to build for the upper end, the higher end of the market. So the government is not at all insensitive to these issues. We are fully cognizant of them. But as I said before, I'd rather be Premier grappling with those problems than grappling with the problems of which the member from Georgetown Central and others justifiably complained when we took office, that is unemployment, significant unemployment of our own people.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that the Premier has given a long preamble of what the government is doing, but Mr. Chair, I asked him a pretty simple question, and he could simply say yes or no. And let me repeat the question again, because he said a whole lot but didn't answer my question. Has there been a SWOT analysis of pros and cons of policy decisions and how they affect traffic in the Cayman Islands and housing market prices in the Cayman Islands? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, the member obviously was not listening, so I'll repeat what I said just now. You have to repeat it until they get it right. I mean, when you're in school, the teacher has to go over the stuff over and over again until the student actually gets it. Mr. Chairman, I started what I said last time by saying this. The government has not taken any deliberate policy decision to increase the population or to increase the number of work permits. Those increases are the result of the policy decision the government took to work to contain government expenditure, to get government's financial state back in the black, and to reduce unemployment, to stimulate the economy, to provide the necessary incentives and encouragement to the business community to invest and develop their businesses. That is the policy decision the government took. So we didn't have to do any SWOT analysis about the other things, because we made no policy decisions deliberately aimed at increasing population or increasing the number of cars or whatever the case may be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wrapping up now. The Premier just said that they couldn't do a lot of the things necessary to attack these issues, particularly with traffic, because they had no money. Can the Premier say whether or not they've had a surplus or surplus over the last 5 budgets?
Member, I think you know the answer to that question.
Well, I'm not familiar. I was in this House for the last 2.5 years, Mr. Chair, and neither maybe the listening public. So I'm asking, have we had a surplus for the last 5 budget, which he was in charge of over those terms? We had 4 budgets in 2013 and 2 now.
Mr. Chairman, you are probably better placed to answer that than I. You're the Minister of Finance, sir.
Well, I think certainly I've made a certain number of utterances with regard to the budget surpluses that we've enjoyed since 2013, sir. They're well known, well documented. It's a superfluous question. I'm sorry, sir. Let's have another one or give somebody else another chance.
Okay, so that's a yes. We've had a surplus for the last 6 years every time we've had a budget, correct?
That is correct. Since 2013, we have had budget surpluses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you today, Honorable Premier. I notice the cost center that we're looking at actually has 2 outputs in it. And I noticed one of them have actually increased. So our CBO1 is made up of CAB1 and CAB2. And I noticed CAB1 over the next 2 years is actually going up by 48%. But the metrics or the measurements that we're using in terms of quantity or what we can expect in terms of output has remained the same. So I'm curious as to why the cost is actually going up, but in essence, the measurements or the metrics or the output has remained the same in the budget. So I'm just curious as to why.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the honourable member to repeat that again for me? I'm not following that.
No problem. Okay, if you look at the estimates on page 43, the very last line where you see where the cost is going from. The cost is going from 1.4 million in 2009 forecast to 1.6 million in 2020. But if you go down to the actual very last line, it says this group compromises budget statement output CAB1 and CAB2. So if you go to the budget statements and you look at CAB1, you will see that the cost is actually going from 504,000 to 766,000, which is an increase of almost 263,000, and roughly about 50%. So we're trying to figure out. But if you look at the very metrics in terms of the quantity, those have actually remained the same in terms of the what we're getting for that cost.
Got you now.
Okay, so we're just trying to figure out what's driving the increase when the output has remained the same. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question. With your permission, I'll ask the Cabinet Secretary to respond to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Samuel Rose, and I'm the Cabinet Secretary, Chief Officer responsible for the Cabinet Office. To respond to the member's question, it's a pretty straightforward explanation. We've had increase in the cost to produce the outputs. We have a number of increases in supplies and consumables to more accurately reflect the cost of delivering the outputs, as well as we had some staff costs built into that as well, which weren't fully budgeted for in the 2018-19 budget that is now fully considered in 2020 and 2021. Plus, there's the additional pension, COLA, Cynical, which all went up significantly over the previous budget. So.
Thank you very much for that, for the Cabinet Secretary. Through you, Mr. Chairman, firstly, just looking at the Auditor General's report, the ISO 260. First, I want to congratulate the Cabinet Office team because in terms of audit adjustment, they had one of the very fewest amount of audit adjustment compared to other entities. So I think that's an achievement on their side. But I know it's one of the things that the Auditor General touched on was concerning the acting for people who are exceeding 12 months. Can you tell me if there's been an update with regards to those positions now falling within the personal regulations, if they're now compliant, or if you have dealt with it, or thanks.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. To answer the member's question, yes, just about all of the acting positions have been addressed. So we had a number of individuals who were covering for other positions, and so we've now had evaluations, we've had recruitment processes complete, and I think just about all of those actings have the long-term acting, because obviously when someone's traveling or on vacation, we'll have individuals act up, but we did have a number of long-term acting roles, and just about all of them are resolved now.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I noticed the Auditor General had also touched on the amount of outstanding leave for some employees. Now, I know once you're short staff, it's always difficult to catch up when people are not taking vacation. Have government cashed out on those leaves, or is there a situation where we're looking to have those leaves carry forward, but it would be good if we cash them out or pay up the staff?
Mr. Chair, one of the challenges with this one is that I believe I am one of the causes of the outstanding leave as well. When you have a small entity like the Cabinet Office, we have a fantastic cadre of staff who are exceedingly dedicated, but obviously they need to have the ability to take their leave as well. But things come from time to time. As you know, when we have these major events or what have you, have individuals who are covering excessive amounts of hours. We have things that cover people have to work over weekends, public holidays, etc. So we have been working assiduously to cut down on people's outstanding leave and ensure that they take it. And if anything, it's a testament to the dedication and commitment of the staff.
We have seen, through you, Mr. Chairman, we have seen other ministries actually cash out leaves for the staff. Is this something that because eventually it's almost impossible to catch up, and at some point you have to zero the clock. Would you guys consider at a minimum then cashing out some of this leave, so at least it be consistent across the board as other ministries?
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question to the member. Yes, it's something that we have considered from time to time. We've had to do a combination of things, and there have been occasions, unfortunately, where individuals have had to actually call upon that leave because of extended issues that require them to take some additional time. So it's something we are willing to consider. We take it on a case-by-case basis, and we do have some individuals who are getting closer to the end of their time in the public service, so for whom they may be more than happy to obviously take home that money in cash. So it's something we're willing to do.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, one of the issues that the Auditor General did raise was credit card management, particularly in the UK office, where some individuals kind of fell outside the policy and some limits were outside the policy. I just pretty much, if the Cabinet Secretary can provide this committee with an update in terms of where we are in terms of getting everyone compliant with the policy.
Mr. Chairman, there's been a transfer of the subject. The government office in London is now under another of the ministries for which I have constitutional responsibility, which is the international trade. So I don't have that detailed response myself, but if the member is patient, Eric Bush will be available when we come to that, so you can ask the question then. All right.
And thank you, Honorable Premier. Just one of the, if that's the case, then the other questions actually relate to the UK office, so we'll just actually wait on that one. Well, when it comes on there, we'll deal with it at that time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I want to go back to that leave thing. Is it a policy of government to give time off in lieu? And does that add on to the amount of leave that people have accumulated?
So the leave is a bit complicated. Obviously, we know that everyone gets, based on your, sorry, Mr. Chair, through you, based on your tenure within the public service, you get an X amount of days, 25, 28, some cases, I think it's like 18, depending on how long you've been in the public service. There's quite a bit of discretion for chief officers to allow people to take time off in lieu, but that's generally also costed against comp time. So if individuals have worked additional hours, worked into the night, what have you, they may say, well, I'll come in later on the next day, etc. So we do time off in lieu, and sometimes the leave that is accrued is, I think the main number you're looking at is the actual annual leave allotment. There's individuals who may not have taken their full annual leave allotment due to various factors, and so we, at the chief officer's discretion, they may have permission to roll over additional days beyond the five days. And so it's difficult as a chief officer to, if someone has not had the opportunity to take the time off, to then turn around and take the time back from them, not allow them to roll the days over into the following year.
So, Mr. Chairman, that means we have two separate issues then. Does government pay for that time off in lieu, or at comp time now? I'm talking about. Is that paid for, cashed out, considered? If you were going to cash out, would you cash that out also?
Mr. Chair, through you, I think there may be circumstances where it could be considered to cash it out. Again, there's also overtime. That's a whole nother thing again. So there are occasions where people may have received permission to cash out their comp time, and there are occasions where people will cash out their untaken leave.
So, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary can tell us, if you have at what, is everybody allowed to have comp time, to utilize comp time and register?
Through you, Mr. Chair, obviously, if the comp time is supposed to be something that you grant permission in advance, so you should have an idea, say, well, someone comes to you and says, sir, I will need to work additional hours to address X, Y, and Z. So you should have permission in advance before the comp time is accrued. It's not a matter of individuals saying, I'm just going to stay late every night and for an additional 2 hours and claim it back as comp time. It should be something that should be agreed with the appointing officer prior to the time actually being accrued. There are occasions where that's not possible. Someone's addressing an emergency situation, and with their dedication and commitment, they'll come in and stay working on a long time for a weekend, and you, again, as appointing officer, if you have a good working relationship with this individual, you see the individual is committed to their work, they're accomplishing the goals of the organization, then generally, in cases like that, you would say, yes, while we didn't get it up front, we approve this, we can see that the time was put in and the work was done due to circumstances beyond your control. So that's available for all public servants, sir. Well, generally.
I thought there were certain levels where that starts. Not all within your office, and those below those levels would then be given over time, which is approved up front. but you're telling me it's everybody in your office that would be allowed to do comp time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member for allowing me to provide more clarity. We don't have any wage workers within the Cabinet Office, so I think with wage workers, I think they would be eligible for overtime in general. I think comp time wouldn't necessarily apply to them. So within my cadre, within my team, I think everybody would be eligible for comp time should a case be made for comp time. So to be clear.
Okay, that wasn't the answer I got. What I heard was that all civil servants are eligible for comp time, so I just extrapolated that into your office. Okay, that's fine. As long as no one is eligible for overtime, they get comp time, which is, yes, okay, good.
All those in favor of CBO 1, Development and Coordination of Government Policy, $1,612,833 in 2020, and $1,847,280 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. CBO 2, Cabinet and National Security Council Support and Servicing, $1,355,772 in 2020, $1,340,771 in 2021. Are there any questions? There are no questions. All in favor of CBO 2, Cabinet and National Security Council Support and Servicing for $1,355,772 in 2020 and $1,340,771 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. CBO 9, Protocol Services, $701,033 in 2020, $701,032 in 2021. Questions? Member for Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Premier, I couldn't help but notice that the costs went up from roughly 62,000 in 2019 to a projected 701,000 in 2020, which is an increase of 52% or 239,000. And I was just trying to figure out what was the basis for that increased cost.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that detail myself. The Cabinet Secretary may do, but generally speaking, the Protocol Office has been doing a lot more and than previously was the case. And I knew they got some new equipment and so forth, so I'll let the CapSec deal with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the Premier has touched on one of the main drivers here. As you know, we acquired additional vehicles a few years ago, so we have 3 new vehicles, and so a large percentage of numbers attributed to depreciation for those vehicles. We obviously are also we have increased costs for drivers, increased demand for drivers, not just locally, but we've had a number of international events and stuff that draws on our resources. And we also have, as you know, we're working on the upgrades to the National Heroes Square. So we have a couple of things that have been added in that weren't there before.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, thanks to Cap Secretary for the answer. And I was just curious as to the expected royal visit from, I think, Prince from, was it Monaco or something next year. Where would that be budgeted? Would it be budgeted here or be budgeted someplace else?
Again, thank you, sir. While I believe the other ministry will be taking the lead on the overall visit, as you would expect when we have those types of visits, we also anticipate additional costs for protocol services. So we have to also be in a position to be able to deliver on those services. So, and as you know, sometimes there are occasions that we have CPA events hosted here. We have ministers and MPs visiting from other countries for which there are support required. So these things increase the cost. So we might not have an overview of everyone that's coming in, and we're not necessarily the lead agency or the lead team on organizing a visit, but we must be in a position to provide the support and services required and extend the courtesies that are required for visiting dignitaries.
Okay, thank you very much. Just more from a comment standpoint, because this is one of the things that we have noticed is that where we see the cost is going up, but the metrics between years have remained the same. I mean, naturally, if you're increasing costs by 50% and your output remains the same, then naturally that would ask questions. So I will ask, I guess, in future, whenever we're looking at these budget stuff, to look at also the measurements that we're using, because it's quite misleading listening to what the Cabinet Secretary has just said.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, member from East End.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just interested in knowing how many staff members is in this protocol office.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have 3 full-time staff members.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary can say to us, I don't use protocol that much. Only when we go on a CPA thing, maybe they'll come, Derek. But with the amount of times I've seen dignitaries coming into this country, the Premier and his entourage leaving, and 3 people? Do we really think that? I know initially we didn't envisage only 3 people because because the Premier knows that this was developed on an initiative from myself way back when, and at that time we were talking about 10 to 12 people in the protocol office. We may not need all that. That was a setup thought. But certainly 3 people, there is no way they can even go off on training based on the amount of people that are constantly coming into this country.
Mr. Chairman, this is, I think, it's an example of the government's effort to contain costs. What we do is when we have major events, we co-opt people from other departments to come in and help, rather than running, additional 7 staff full time.
Mr. Chairman, I hear the Premier, and there's no way, no matter how many you have within the office, you're still going to have to co-op. Yeah, that is worldwide. We do that. We use other people. But I'm talking about the actual management of the different sections of protocol is what I'm concerned about. I mean, for instance, you got one person going to meet delegations and the likes. That is a permanent staff. And I am not going to say that he's tired. I wouldn't say that. But certainly it's strenuous for 3 people being in a protocol office as sophisticated as this country is becoming. But if the Premier is saying that he try and cut down the cost, let's not work people to death for the price of a few dollars too. And that's not, don't need to comment on that, okay?
Mr. Speaker, the government's deliberate policy with respect to the civil services, to try to keep the numbers as tight as we can so we can pay civil servants better.
Really, and all, with all the increase that you have done in the civil service? No.
All in favor
Yeah,
of...
informed, but we know the increases that has gone on in the civil service since, and the keeping control, really, and we go on 5% and all that, which is good. That's not keeping in control.
All in favor of CBO 9, Protocol Services, $701,033 in 2020 and $701,032 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. CBO 11, Freedom of Information and Data Protection Coordination, $510,089 in 2020 and $510,088 in 2021. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just see that in the budget statement, the money is allocated or for the implementation of the data protection and implementation and compliance. I just want to update on how is that going, because obviously we're transitioning into that as a government. How is the process going? Is it difficult to find any hurdles? Just an update.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. We have we have. I'm trying. This is a new position, so I didn't know the name. Information Rights Coordinator, Ms. Aubrey Borden is here, and she'll be able to brief Cabinet about the progress on that. Not Cabinet, Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Aubrey Bodden. I'm seconded to the position of Information Rights Coordinator in the Cabinet Office since August of this year. And through you, Mr. Chair, the preparations are going very well across the public service, and they certainly were before my appointment as well. A number of agencies have been taking very proactive steps to review policies, to review practices, to look at any areas where there are improvements that could be made, and we consider that the Cabinet Office is bringing additional resources to supplement and to provide some central coordination where further efficiencies can be gained by doing once from the centre for all ministries, portfolios, departments, statutory authorities, and government companies. Therefore, our focus in the Cabinet Office is on training, on procedures that will be relevant across all agencies, so particularly where individuals are seeking to exercise their rights under the data protection law, and also for reactive assistance where it's possible that a entity knows that they might need to review something, but they need some external resources to help ensure that that is robust, and that's where the Cabinet Office is coming in.
Wow. That's it. That's all I can say. Thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're most welcome.
All in favor of CBO 11, Freedom of Information and Data Protection Coordination, $510,089 in 2020 and $510,088 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. CBO 17, Government Communications Services, $2,142,645 in 2020 and $2,140,123 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Boddentown West and a member from Northside.
I will cede seniority to the member from Northside. He can go before me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Member for Northside, please proceed.
Thank you, member for Boddentown West. Mr. Chairman, there's a roughly a 30% increase here, but the quantities and everything remain the same. First question to you, Mr. Chairman, should we ignore all of the information that's contained in these documents as related to quantity, quality, because everything on quality is 100%, and the quantities just seem to be a cut and paste exercise from the year before. I mean, should there be any relationship between the quantities listed and the bottom line?
Actually, this is one of them where the very last quantity that actually dropped, if you look at it. It's one of the very few ones where we went from 50 to 60 to 40 to 50, so.
But the quantities remain the same.
Member from North Side, I don't think there are things that we should be ignoring because that information is provided by the various ministries and SAGCs and other departments, offices. It all emanates from their office.
Okay. Other question is, through you to the minister, is this the area where that is the payments to Radio Cayman for the ads for the port is being paid from? Is that one of the reasons for the increase?
No, Mr. Chairman. No to both questions.
Member for Bordentown West,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Premier. I noticed in the planning estimates that CBO 17 relates to GIS 25, GIS 26, GIS 28, GIS 29, ICU 1, and SCU 1. Just looking at ICU 1 in the budget statements and looking at the description, one of the things that jumped out for me on this spend is that in terms of internal communication and engagement, it refers to implementation of the 5-year strategic plan for the civil service and other projects. I was just curious as to why this, if it's related to the civil service and something internal to the 5-year civil service strategic plan, if this was something cost that should have been included under the deputy governor as opposed to under the cabinet office. So I was just curious as to why this cost was here as opposed to someplace else.
Mr. Chairman, the CAPSEC will address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To answer the member's question, the internal communications unit is a part of the Cabinet Office communications structure. So we, as you know, we've seconded a director of communications, and under the director we have GIS, we have internal comms, and we have the strategic communications and campaigns unit. So from the outset, the member has touched on a very, very important point. From the outset, there was some discussion, would internal comms fall within the portfolio of the civil service or fall within GIS? But being that it's part of the broader communications structure and is also charged with dealing with things like the updated gov.ky, the whole revamping of the government's website and what have you, it was felt that it would be a stronger link with the overall communications family of suite of services. So we made that decision quite some time ago, and so one of the main deliverables is, in addition to, like I say, maintaining our daily communication on the hub, keeping the civil service up to date in what's happening, we've also taken on the 5-year strategic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Premier. Also, SCU1, Strategic Communication and Engagement, which also comprises of CBO 17. We know the cost went from 400,000 to 809,000. And also what we noticed in this one, the actual, some of the metrics actually went down. So I was just curious as to why basically 102% increase in cost, but in some cases the quantity actually decreasing. So we're just curious as to what's driving it with the quantities going the other way.
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask the CAPSEC to address that as well.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, through you. So originally we had a half year's budget. So I think that original number is for a half year. And now we have fully built out that team. That team is a 3-person unit as well with 3 individuals. So this is the full cost for the full 3-person team for strategic comms.
No, hold a second, Mr. Chairman. Well, if that's the case, then for the half year, your metrics then for the 2020 and 2021 should double what 2019 metrics is. Instead, the metrics of 2019 is actually higher than the metrics of 2020 and 2021. So I would expect at a minimum those quantities to actually double. That's on page 37 of the budget statements, if anyone wants to follow along. So I would expect the metrics to go the other way.
Mr. Chair, I will allow my CFO just to provide a quick explanation on the numbers for the outputs there.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Krista Simon Mohammed. I am the CFO for the Cabinet Office. Through you, Chairman, can a member please repeat the question?
Yeah, thanks. We're actually on CBO 17, which comprise also of SEU 1. And when we look at page 37 of the budget statement, we recognize that the cost went from 400,000 forecasted costs of 400,000 in 2019 to $809,544 in 2020, and the same for 2021. So it's more than 102% increase. But what we notice is that if you look at the quantity of what we're purchasing for that, like in terms of number of campaigns developed, it went from 2 to 4 in 2019 to 1 to 3 in 2020. And even the number of channel improvement initiative went from 6 to 8 in 2019 to 2 to 4 in 2020. So with the metrics actually going down, we're curious as to why costs more than double.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that appears to be an error in the numbers.
That's fine by me then. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and congratulations for having very limited audit adjustments on your financial statements. Well done.
Thank you, true, Mr. Chair.
Member for Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this where Radio Cayman News dealt with? Okay, thank you.
No, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister or the chief or the cabinet secretary say what is the policy for GIS? What is the? Let me rephrase, Mr. Chair. What is the outline purpose of GIS, and is there a document to go along with that?
Government Information Services is the government's communication vehicle. So its purpose is to get out information about what is going on in government, whether it's government policies or matters relating to the civil service. In broad strokes, that's what it's the government's marketing agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, forgive me for being naive, but is there a document that outlines exactly their purpose that we can have access to? Has one been created?
Mr. Chairman, there's a government communication strategy, which is set out in a document which we're happy to share.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister or the cabinet secretary say whether or not any other elected members outside of GIS, outside of the government, I apologize, are allowed to have access to GIS, and if so, what accessibilities are they allowed are afforded to them?
Mr. Chairman, GIS is the government's information communication machine. It is not the elected members' communication machine. Its purpose is to, as I say, to promote government policies and to provide information about what is going on in government. Now, from time to time and over the years, GIS has facilitated the work of Parliament, but it doesn't do individual it does things like Christmas messages and that sort of stuff more broadly. But I think what the member for Georgetown Central needs to appreciate is that an opposition in our system of government, the opposition is the government in waiting. Therefore, you can't have a government information machine like GIS promoting messages which are counter to what the government is trying to do. When you get in government, then it becomes your marketing agency. So to the extent that the messages are like Christmas messages and are generally neutral, that is fine. But GIS function is not to promote the messages of the opposition.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm glad that the Premier said that GIS is the government's marketing machine and not the opposition's. But can the Premier say, in respect to his comments about the void created by the closure of Cayman 27, that the country is only now allowed to hear from the machine, television-wise, the machine of the government and not the other side of the coin of things, if I dare say. Can the Premier update how they're going with filling that void that was lost as a result of the closure of Cayman 27?
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask the CABSEC or the director to address those. But government was approached by the Cayman Compass to do a sort of joint initiative to provide better news coverage, particularly after Cayman 27 ceased to operate. So the government does not for 1 minute think that this is the answer. What we are trying to do is address a situation which has come about in the interim through CIGTV.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I can add would be to provide in writing. I can give you an update, but we can also provide in writing the proof of concept proposal on the partnership between CIGTV and the Compass. Some of the expectations include the Compass Media providing CIGTV with 3 to 5 community-based videos or scripts per day, which CIGTV can decide whether or not to use. There's likewise, there is absolutely, it's non-exclusive, we've actually reached out to UCCI as well to provide, because they have a media team there. I think they're teaching it or what have you in the school. So we've asked UCCI whether or not they would wish to also provide community-based stories, etc. One of the things that the CIG-TV also did was work with the National Weather Service to provide a weather report as well. So the numbers of news items has increased, etc. But as the Premier alluded to, we don't view this necessarily as an end-all and be-all.
So would you agree that what you proposed just now is not filling the void?
No, Mr. Chairman. It is helping to get some information out to the public, which was particularly the weather reports and some news. But it is not expected to, and it is not attempting to operate as an independent private sector television station. I hope one comes about. What we're trying to do is to address, as far as we can, the void that has been created, as I said.
Mr. Chair, can the Premier or the Cabinet Secretary say if they find that there's a potential perception of conflict of interest with the government working with independent local media house that is, by its role, expected to challenge all sides of government, whether opposition or the government side? Does the government feel that there's a potential conflict of interest in that relationship?
Is the member suggesting that we should shut down CIG-TV and then there be no information via television?
Mr. Chair, through you, of course I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that your solution to filling the void of the loss of Cayman 27 is one that has created a potential conflict of interest for the country. We have a very credible newspaper in Cayman that is now can be perceived as to be working with the government. And we just heard the Premier said that GIS's job is to be the machine necessary to sell the government's message, but yet they're in collaboration together. So I want the Premier to explain, do they not see that as a conflict of interest, or should we now start doubting the credibility of Compass as a result of this joint venture?
I ask the member again, what is his suggestion? Should we shut down CIG-TV?
Mr. Chair, if the Premier chooses not to answer the question, that's fine, but I'm not the one here that's running the government. No, it's your job to answer the question. Unfortunately, sir, this is Finance Committee. You brought this budget. It's your questions to answer. Now, if you want me to take your job, I'm happy to do that, sir. But you're the one that needs to answer the question, not me.
Mr. Chairman, the member did not ask a question. The member put his position forward as a rhetorical question.
Mr. Chair,
And I think
let me rephrase the question again, or repeat. Does the government see the relationship with the Cayman Compass as conflicting?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We are very careful. If he pays attention to the news reports, he will see that they are very, very factual, with no messaging at all. And if he or anybody else pays attention to the Compass itself, you will hardly describe the Compass's coverage of the news as being biased in favor of the government.
Mr. Chair,
Northside.
just to close up my line of questioning in respect to this, please.
One last one.
Thank you. In this arrangement, are stories that are going to be run in Cayman Compass going to be run on GIS television? And if so, if there are stories that are run in the Compass that conflict with the government's position, are they going to be willing to cover them on the GIS television station?
Mr. Chairman, I said just now that there is no messaging in the CIG news. It is all fact-based. No elected member of government has any say or even any knowledge of what is going to be carried on CIG TV. There's no involvement whatsoever. This is managed by GIS and the people at the campus. They decide on what the particular newscast is going to be on any given day.
So is that a yes or a no? Does that mean that they're not going to carry it? I didn't get the answer. Because I'm struggling, Mr. Chair, because I'm asking questions, but I'm still not getting the answers. Will GIS cover stories that are not in the best interest of the government on a GIS website? Meaning a bad story about the government. Simple, put it in common man's terms.
Mr. Chairman, I've just said, I have no knowledge of what they do day to day, or no involvement in it.
Mr. Chair, maybe somebody that does have some knowledge about it can answer the question then, like maybe the person in charge of GIS or the cabinet secretary, but it's a question that needs an answer in all due respect, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I might, in an attempt to provide some clarity to the member, again, and I will provide you with a copy of the agreement. It's a very, very straightforward agreement. It's asking Compass Media to provide 3 to 5 community-based stories. So I think another way of putting it is soft news. You know, things that happen in the community on the weekend, events, etc. Right? And I can see, for instance, just giving an example, I can see where you would have a cleanup or something in your community that was covered. Those types of things would be covered on as part of the package that we receive from the Compass Media. We don't know what they're going to send to SIG TV. I think that's fair to say. I wouldn't have any knowledge, or nor would the director or the chief communications officer know what, chief information officer know in advance what Compass are going to send. But what was discussed, to the best of my knowledge, was community-based stories coming across to fill that gap, because as you know, Cayman 27 would have covered lots of community events, galas and school events, graduations, all those things that happen. I mean, those weren't part of the CIG TV's initial package of things that they would cover. I guess perhaps graduations of their public schools, etc. So that's.
Thank you, CAPSEC. Through you, Mr. Chair, that gives a better, clearer picture of what is going to be coming through between the two, and soft news, community-based stories. So why is it then we are suggesting that will help fill the void? When we're just talking about community events, I mean, the serious issues and stories obviously are not going to be related back to GIS to be covered, correct?
Mr. Chair, once again, I can't advance, I cannot predict what the Compass Media will send across in terms of the request of 3 to 5 community-based videos or scripts. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not trying to be difficult in any way, shape, or form, but I can't predict what they would send across in the package.
And if they did send across something in the package, a story that is not shedding good light on the government, will GIS run that story?
Mr. Chair, I guess it would have to be considered. I think that's a fair answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member for North Side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've been informed over the weekend that CIG TV is now available on Flow Cable TV. Can the member confirm that, and what channel it is, and why are these kind of arrangements not made public?
Mr. Chair, through you and to the member, this is no attempt to make any state secret. We're very pleased that Flow has finally been able to come to an agreement with us. It has been in test mode. That's my understanding. So I'm told it's channel 106, and an official announcement was going to come, because obviously when they put the channel up, they have to make sure the feed is working properly. We wouldn't want to tell the world that it's up and running now, and we're having feed issues. So the agreement was just recently put in place, and so now we're about to make an official announcement on it. This is the last of the 3 major providers for which SIG TV is carried on.
To you, Mr. Chairman, nothing else on Flow TV works on our side, so if it doesn't work on our side, you're not going to do it?
Mr. Chair, I don't. We finish? Mr. Chairman, I guess I might as well start from the back, go forward to all these questions I have here. If Flow is now carrying CIG TV, has that been approved by OFREG? You need answer or stop it?
I do believe that we'll have an opportunity to ask that question on the other heading.
Mr. Chairman, the view of the government is that it does not require approval of OFREG for this CIGTV to be carried on Flow. It's carried on Logic, it's carried on C3 already. So the member may not agree with that, but that's the government's position.
Mr. Chairman, whether it's OFREG, C3, or Digicel, it doesn't matter. The government has a license. The government has a regulator, just like the cables, the fiber optic cables that we put through Georgetown. There had to be an agreement with OFREG to lease those out. It's no different. Because what government would be doing is breaking their own laws.
We don't take that view, Mr. Chairman. Our advice is different. The member is entitled to his view. If he thinks government is in breach of the agreement, then he should take whatever action he thinks he needs to take. But the government's position is that we are in full compliance with the law.
Mr. Chairman, okay, since the Premier said that he believes his advice is that he's in full compliance with the law. I've been trying to get one of the laws, but it look like we don't have any here. Oh, you don't interpret, we don't interpret them here. So what's the purpose of having here then? Pass laws only and leave it like that. Oh, okay. That's the least. That's the least we can do. One person can't make the decision here, but the whole parliament can change them. Right. My concern is that we have been since the 90s in television, and we recently understood that the country had become dependent upon that visual means of getting news, and 27 was shut down for whatever reason, but most of it was surrounded with local content, and they couldn't meet the necessary, as I understand it, financially, they couldn't keep it up. Whilst the others were not doing it at great expense to their bottom line, and now government is facilitating it. When I listened carefully to the explanation as to the the value of GIS in this country. And it is a government broadcasting machinery. Now, we can't use that to now assist a private sector who has to provide a different medium. We celebrated the life of Mr. Siaga here recently. Siaga, in one of his books, spoke about the government's largesse and the dependence of the private media thereon. And there must never be a crossover. To survive, the media depends upon the largesse of government for advertisements and what have you. That's what it's about. In the Caribbean, particularly in the Caribbean, in small countries. And here we are with a public broadcasting system being used. We may not see it as a conflict, but the perception is extremely concerned and should be viewed differently.
You're going to have a question here, member?
Have we considered developing CIGTV to the point where it is non-dependent upon the private sector to survive? And number two, is government being paid from those providers, those telecom providers, to get a CIGTV message?
Mr. Chairman, I think there is some confusion on the part of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Government is being provided a service. The country is being provided a service by being able to get CIGTV carried on these private networks. The country is better off, its populace is better informed as a result. And no, Mr. Chairman, we are not being paid anything for it, nor are we paying anything for it.
Mr. Chairman, that is does this then meet part of their license agreement with the same government?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that I can answer that question now. I think we can probably address that when we get to off-reg, because I don't have those folk lined up right now, although they're here. But to answer the other part of the question, yes, Mr. Chairman, we certainly, but very briefly, considered whether it would be viable to develop CIGTV into something like a public broadcasting company. But there are costs involved in that. And the length of time all of that will take, we just decided maybe some other government may do that. What we were trying to do, which is what we're doing, is to in some way address some of the deficits now in the overall media reporting framework or apparatus caused as a result of the closure of Cayman's only private sector sort of public information
Mr. Chairman,
television station.
I wonder if the Premier can tell us, for years we have asked and we have been told that it would be put in place the schedule of things on CIGTV since 2011 when this thing was put in place, I believe.
It's in place.
Does anyone know when it comes on?
I'll ask the Director of JS to address the question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, Suzette Banks, Chief Information Officer, GIS. We have the schedule is currently delivered a number of ways. Sorry. The schedule is currently delivered a number of ways. At the moment, for Logic customers, they are able to see the guide along with the channel guide for the whole cable service that Logic provides. We also, to ensure that we reach as many people as possible, have come to an arrangement with the Caymanian Times to publish the guide for the week.
Is that your final answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, couple things were committed to in this Finance Committee. One was that we were migrating from this thing of subscription for the country who did not subscribe to any of those providers to be able to get CIG TV. Has that been done?
SIG TV is, Mr. Chairman, sorry. SIG TV, in addition to being available through the 3 cable providers, is also available on demand from YouTube. The purpose of the arrangement with Caymanian Times is specifically to ensure that the guide is available to people in another format outside of the cable TV guide that is available from the providers electronically.
Can someone in East End see CIG TV with a whip antenna?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I would be grateful if the member would repeat that.
Can someone in East End, Northside, Bartontown, wherever in the country, view CIG TV through a ordinary whip antenna on their house?
An outdoor antenna?
Free-to-air.
Yes, sir. Our understanding is that SIG TV should be available across Grand Cayman with the use of an outdoor antenna. And that is actually a free service provided by Logic and has been for some years. And we check with them from time to time to ensure the coverage map. And our most recent assurance from them in the last few months is that it extends across Grand Cayman.
I'm asking, has government set up the infrastructure to ensure that the country has coverage of CIG TV?
From this standpoint that I just mentioned, sir, Mr. Chair, Logic does provide that over-the-air service if it is over-the-air that's being discussed. And it is available to anyone, regardless of whether they are a Logic subscriber or not, is available with the purchase of an outdoor antenna.
What channel on Logic?
On Logic, I understand it's also 23.
23 now?
I understand it's 23 for the cable channel and for the over-the-air channel.
Who would know when I said infrastructure, I wanted to know about the physical infrastructure, whether it's digital components, analog components, whatever it is, which is what was promised to us. It was promised also that the schedule would be available on screen, whether it's selective schedule or ran at different times between programs, like just before the hour. And we were also promised that we were going to take CIG TV to a new level as an educational program, such as basic English, basic math, that kind of stuff, for series of them. And I'm just wondering if all these things have been put in place.
Sir, I think that's three different questions, Mr. Chair, so I will try and address them. Might not be in the order in which the member asked. The first question was with regards to the infrastructure for over the air. Do I understand that correctly? I think, as has been previously discussed in past finance committees, that over the air, the mechanism necessary for the delivery of over the air is obsolete. TVs that receive over the air are no longer being produced in the States. This kind of a more complex discussion than that, I'm afraid that I can't deliver. I can only tell you that I think it would be a mistake for me to try. We can try and submit a written answer that discusses that. Yes? Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, I think the second question was whether the programming guide is being broadcast on the TV channel itself. And it is my officer that has been assigned to doing programming. It is my understanding from him that that has always been the case. If the question extends to the regularity of that, I would have to confirm with him exactly when that is. And if it is, I think the member had said, Mr. Chair, that suggested that specific timings for that had been agreed.
If I may, I look at 28, I have the other one. I don't even know what that is.
The Old Wester?
Logic, I think it is. And it just says CIG TV, CIG TV, CIG TV, CIG TV. As many times as you can scroll across. Now, when the broadcast for the Legislative Assembly is on, during that period, it says the Legislative Assembly, whatever that is. But it adequately describes what is on the TV at that time. But during other periods, it just says CIG TV, CIG TV. And you never see it, the schedule then, other than that selective schedule, coming up on the TV itself.
Mr. Chair, it may be down to the versions of Logic that exist. If the member has what used to be, I think the old Westar was 28. I can only speak from my personal experience, which has been through the new version of Logic. And I have seen the programming on the cable guide itself when I've gone onto my own TV to review it. It is there.
I
don't know if it's the difference between, again, the newer version of Logic and the older version of Logic, but I can investigate, sir.
So you're telling me that as much as I pay Logic for 2 boxes, smart TVs, they come change the boxes, their own little box, that I'm in this first generation of their thing, not going to migrate over to the second generation, because that could be the only thing based on what you're saying, right? Right. Thank you. But she opened the door. She said that it might be the whole lot, the whole
Well,
first generation. Well, let's now open it and then can answer it.
Well, I think, member, what we should do, as I said before, you know, so these sort of technical questions should be asked of off-reg when we
Chair,
get there.
Mr. Chair, my apologies. We can undertake to investigate if there is a difference between the old West Star, which is now also Logic, on 28, and the new West Star, where SIG TV is currently on 23.
Mr. Chair, I just want to do two questions before we close up this vote. But to also say that in the earlier part, I was interchanging SIG TV with GIS, and I apologize for that because I know they're two different things. And GIS is very important to provide help for the government for their policies and procedures. But SIG TV is a little bit different. Does it have a different mandate than GIS? Because we're covering news, and news has a specific definition. And if we're going to be saying we're carrying news, it got to be news that has all sides, because that would conflict with GIS's strategy and purpose, which is to be the machinery of the government. So is there two different mandates? Can you explain that for me, please?
Mr. Chair, if I may, as the Premier so ably explained, GIS is indeed the public communications arm of government. There is a strategy document that was developed for SIG TV at the time of its creation in 2012, which outlines that it continues over that role, but does give it more leeway in terms of providing, and in particular when it comes to filling an entire TV channel for 24 hours with regards to public information, which is the other arm of GIS. And from the SIG TV standpoint, we have utilized that aspect of things primarily in terms of finding long-form programming, such as the Sunrise Center concerts, various public education talks, to go back to a question that was asked earlier. But we have strived never to put ourselves forward as any kind of alternative to the assorted private sector media houses. The news update that we provide remains and has always been from 2012, what is coming directly out of GIS, and via SIG TV, 3 stories promoting assorted happenings in the public sector.
Thank you. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So we define it as an extension of public information, and that's why it was created. But is it fair to say the definition based on the position of government or the mandate of GIS is public information as long as it meets the mandate to promote the government? Because things that are adverse to the government are not allowed. So would that be a fair statement that I'm saying?
No.
Sir, as Mr. Chair has noted previously, it has always been my understanding that GIS and SIG TV, which is a channel of GIS, that our role is to provide a communications and information service for government. And where events and information that are happening in the community reflect the work of government, we try to incorporate those as well.
Okay, last few questions. Is there any other...
No, member, we sort of litigated this already. Come on.
No,
you asked for 2 questions. Now we're going past the 2 and you got a few more questions.
Mr. Chair, I crave your indulgence because we are actually closing up the viewpoint now, and she's gotten to the point. So this last piece will definitely help me with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Make it quick.
Is it factual that the government news TV, SIG TV, is the only televised news option for the Cayman Islands right now?
Sir, I can't speak to that. I can only tell you that we provide a news update, which has always been intended to be 3 stories about government and the public sector.
Okay, I just want to make a last suggestion that in respect to SIG TV, I know that some other media houses that falls under SIG TV are not streaming live on Facebook. For example, Radio Cayman. I think it's time that we get to that stage, particularly with the void not being filled. Outside of YouTube, Facebook is the next most popular streaming opportunity. So I would encourage to get, in some way, Radio Cayman streaming, particularly for the morning show, to be on streaming on Facebook. Okay, that's a suggestion. Nobody talking to you. I talking to her.
All in favor of CBO 17, Government Communication Services for $2,142,645 in 2020 and $2,140,123 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Ayes have it. Can I just get an invocation to members have questions on CBO 20? You do? Okay. Well, this is a convenient point for us to take the lunch break. It is now 20 to 1. Let's be back at 20 to 2. I'm happy to try it. All right. Let me go ahead and open CBO 20. Advice.
Explain.
CBO 20, advice and assistance to the Premier and administration of the Premier's office, $1,097,435 in 2020 and $986,710 in 2021. Questions? Member for Borden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed before you open this up to questions that what we have included in the planning estimates in terms of the comparison between 2019 and 2020 is actually incorrect. The actual forecasted spend for 2020 should be $1,204,405. If you look into OTP 1 and OTP 5, and in that case, then the spend year on year would have actually decreased by 8%. It would have actually gone down. So it would be difficult, I think, for members to ask questions on that when it's actually so. The numbers are actually incorrect, but with the cost going down, I'm pretty much fine with it. But since these statements also is part of our what we vote on, I just want those corrected for the records. OTP 1 and OTP 5 added together is what makes up CBO 20, and the information for 2019 is incorrect. So we just have those corrected, and then you see that the cost actually went down year on year.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let me put this item to a vote, please. All in favor of CBO 20, advice and assistance to the Premier administration of the Premier's office?
I was just getting ready to vote.
Pardon?
I was just getting ready to vote.
Oh, okay. Advice and assistance to the Premier and administration of the Premier's office, $1,097,435 in 2020 and $986,710 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. You all have questions on CB 21 or CBO 20, 21? I thought we had, no?
Definitely, that's all Radio Cayman, 1, 2, and 3, absolutely. So
Okay.
that one after lunch.
We'll take the lunch break. It is now 1:45. We'll be back at 1:45. Thank you, everyone.